What's up guys, Garrett with SelfTaughtDev. Today we're doing some more Reddit responses, so let's get to it. First one up here, question about free code camp that I couldn't find online. Is it a full course or just parts needed? Like to be proficient, do I need to complete the 3,000 hours? So first off, I wouldn't say, like, let's assume these guys going for a front-end developer position just because that, in my opinion, is the easiest way to break into the tech industry. You don't need to do all of free code camp for it. They've got scientific computing with Python, data analytics, information security, QA stuff, back-end development. A lot of this stuff isn't applicable to the front end. Probably just these first three, maybe four are. Like I've only used data visualization when I worked at Chase. I haven't used it at Amex or any of the other companies. But these first three, I definitely recommend doing those if you want to be a front-end developer. Now, would those get you to a level where you're proficient? That's kind of like debatable. I think you only do 5 projects in this responsive web design certification, and then I assume it's similar in the front-end libraries one. Use code comments. Are there even projects in this one? Use jQuery. Yeah, there we go. Build a random quote machine, markdown previewer, drum machine, JavaScript calculator, and a 25+5 clock. So you build 5 projects in there too. I mean, that'll get you like your base level of knowledge that you need to get into this stuff. I'd say free code camp alone would get you to like close to a level where you can get a job. I'd probably go do the Odin project as well, just because I feel like getting information from multiple sources helps drill it down into your head more. Plus, you're going to be building more projects. The Odin project, is it Project Odin or the Odin project? I can't remember. Just Google Odin project and I'm sure it'll come up. But you'll build more projects there, and building projects is really the most important part. I'd say you probably need to build like 10, maybe 20 projects to be like competent in this. Because a lot of this is just repetition, and you're gonna run into issues. You're gonna be like, I don't know how to solve this. So you're gonna have to Google it and you're gonna find the answer. And then when you run into that issue again on a project, you're gonna be like, wait, how did I solve that last time? And hopefully you remember how you solved it last time. Whenever you run into a problem and you're like, I've seen this before, I'd spend a few minutes trying to remember how you solved it last time before you go Google it again. Because there's something I run into with JavaScript and I Google the answer every time I run into it. And if I would stop doing that, if I would just sit there and try to remember what the answer was for a few minutes, I'd probably remember the answer and not have to keep Googling it. I just like know it next time I come to it. But yeah, building multiple projects is going to be the biggest thing with getting to a proficient / competent level. Free code camp will give you like a good foundation, but I definitely hit multiple sources just because you're going to forget stuff along the way. Because this is probably going to take like a month or 2, maybe 3 to do all of those. So yeah, just recommend hitting up multiple sources after you do this. Shameless plug, I've got my HTML and CSS course out now, so if you want to check that out, that's linked up in the description as well. On the next one, portfolio. Where do I start a website portfolio, like step-by-step, cheapest way? So if I was starting from scratch, like I didn't have my portfolio yet, and I wanted to build one super cheap, like what's cheap to you? Because like a domain name is like $10, and then hosting is like $3 a month, depending on where you get it. So like if you get a domain name through GoDaddy, I think my first one was ghughes13.com, and I just had that linked up on my resume and in YouTube videos because I was making a YouTube channel to try and get a job too. So I don't know, like $15 seems pretty cheap to me. But if you need a free way, you can use GitHub Pages. GitHub Pages, I'm not going to go into how to set that up in this video, but that's a free way to host static sites. If you are using like React or something like that, I check out Netlify because they have really generous free tier and a lot of high quality stuff you can use there. I don't think Heroku does. Heroku got rid of their free stuff. Yeah, I think those would be my answers to that. Like 1, GitHub Pages or Netlify, and then 2, if $15 is like a cheap to you, then you can just get a domain name, because having your own domain name for the site is cool too. Plus it will show employers like, hey, I've wired up sites before to make them publicly accessible on the internet. Anyway, on to the next one. We're gonna do that one last. Anyone here a self-taught iOS developer? Hi, I'm trying to figure out all this iOS stuff for months, but I can't seem to grasp it. Is there anyone with guidance on how to work with code in UIKit? I'm struggling to understand API calls. How many do I need? How many API calls do you need? Where do I put them? What information do I give the function? Thanks in advance. So this is one of the big reasons I'd recommend going with front-end developer before you pivot to another area of the tech industry. If you were a front-end developer first, you'd have all of this stuff down. And plus, from what I've seen, it's way easier to break in it's way easier to get a job as a front-end developer. Companies, specifically startups, are more likely to give you a shot as a front-end developer versus iOS developer. They want you to have a little bit of skill, but the general knowledge is going to transfer. Like if you are working with JavaScript and Node, you're going to know like how functions work, how API calls work, how to use them, how to get the responses back, how to use those. All that changes is basically the syntax. Once you get like one area of code down, that knowledge stack transfers pretty readily to other languages. So like if I needed to pivot to maybe like Java, or I don't know what else I would want to learn. I would like to stick to JavaScript because I like that, but that skill set I have with JavaScript and Node would transfer pretty readily to other stacks or other languages. But this question is very like kind of general, like how many API calls do you need? That to me indicates that you, not trying to be rude or anything, like have no idea what you're talking about. Like how many API calls do you need for what? Like if I'm making let's say like an employee directory site, then I'd probably only need like one API call. I'd probably hit the random user generator API and just say that I need 10 users, and that'll send back a response with 10 users. Where do you put them? Like a lot of this is just relative to what you're building, what information you give the function. Yeah, all three of those are just relative to whatever you're building. If you're building an iOS app, I mean, it still depends. Like what does your app do? What's the purpose of it? What APIs are you calling? And then like how your code's structured, that kind of depends on where you put them. So it's a great question. I just recommend starting off with front-end developer, do that for like a year, and then try and pivot to what other area you want. Looking for success stories, SelfTaughtDev. As someone who's been learning for a few months now, I recently made a huge change that will hopefully pay off, but I'm looking for stories and successes. Please share them with me. So this is a good thing to go out and search for. When I was applying to jobs, it was really cool when I did interview at a place and the guy interviewing me was a self-taught dev. And just kind of having that bond of like, hey, we're both self-taught developers is pretty cool. I think that was at both of the interviews I had. The first one, they only offered me an internship because I wasn't where they needed me to be for a job. But the second one, Marvin, he was like, I think he said he was a cook before he was a developer, and then he taught himself like WordPress, got a job as a WordPress developer, and then moved over to Try Digital, where I was working before. But I'll just share my story real quick, I guess. If anybody else wants to go to r/selftaught.dev that is a developer and share their story, I'm sure I'd appreciate that. What did I do? I was basically a broker at a financial institution, hated my job. People were calling in every day saying, hey, I lost 5-10 grand on a trade. I need you to undo this for me. And we just have to be like, that's not how it works. You made this trade, that's on you. And basically be their verbal punching bag. And I hated it. And I knew I could not do that as a career. So I started waking up at like 5 a.m, studying with Free Code Camp, Team Treehouse, the Odin Project, those MIT courses that are free. I didn't get a whole lot of value out of those, so I don't know how to recommend those. But Free Code Camp, Team Treehouse, Odin Project, my course now, definitely would hit those. But studied, built projects, applied to jobs relentlessly. And after 8 months of studying and applying for jobs, ended up at a marketing startup. Basically heavily customizing WordPress sites with CSS. And that's how I went from broker to engineer. I mean, basically just study your butt off, build cool stuff. And then as long as you build cool stuff, you can point to that and say, hey, look, I built this. You can take a chance on me. I know what I'm doing. It's going to be okay if you hire me. And as long as you keep growing, improving, and learning, eventually somebody will take a chance on you. So, scared of new job. I feel like I might have answered this one already in another video, but he says he's been working as a freelance programmer since the end of 2019. He's self-taught, always worked as a freelancer. He got an offer from a company, and he's not been completely honest with them. I've been honest on everything I've worked on, except the fact that I've never been in a corporate environment. So with that part, if they haven't explicitly asked you, hey, have you ever worked in a corporate environment before? Or like on your resume, if you said you worked in a corporations before, I wouldn't do that. Like, I wouldn't lie in your resume. I wouldn't put false jobs on there. But I mean, the fact that you have the freelance stuff is great on its own. Anyway, let's read the rest of the question. And that 100% of my work experience is doing freelance. Now I'm really scared. Do you have any advice for me? Thanks. So the designer guy I used to work with on freelance projects, I don't know if he ever worked in like a corporate environment as a designer before. I don't think he did, but he was basically just doing freelance design, and he was making a good chunk of money off that, enough to live off of, and did that for like 5, 6, 7 years. And then recently he's got an offer from a large company, and it was like the mid 6 figures for him to come in and be a senior designer. I might have been saying developer, I meant designer for this one, but still counts. Like the skill set you develop, the skill set you get being a freelance programmer, designer, whatever, translates pretty well to the corporate environment. I mean, you're gonna have to get used to some new stuff, but that's gonna happen at any job. But as long as you didn't like lie about previous jobs on your resume, and you haven't tried to be implying that you've worked in corporate environments before, or even if you did and you haven't, like, I don't think that's going to be that big of a deal. I feel like this is more just you being nervous about starting a new job and kind of imposter syndrome maybe because you're self-taught and just been a freelancer since 2019. But if you just buckle down and do it, I'm sure it's just gonna work out good for you. Don't worry. Next one here. Is it still worth it to become a developer, software engineer in the current climate work market? What do you think is the best route to become one? Self-taught, bootcamp, or both? Self-taught, definitely. Bootcamp, the only way I could justify a bootcamp is if you just do not have the willpower or motivation to sit down and study on your own. And if you can't do that, I don't know if this is a good career path for you. Like, maybe you should pick something else. You have to actually like code and learning about it on your own. Otherwise, you're not going to become that great of a developer, because there's a limit to how high you can go if you're just working 9 to 5 and then you get off and then you don't do anything else. Like, if you're the best developers I've seen get off work and they've got other projects on their own they're working on. Like one of the guys I met at the gym, he's working on he's got a group of guys and he's doing crypto stuff for like Carvana or something like that. And I don't know which exactly one it is. But as a developer, doing stuff outside of work is going to greatly increase your skill set, like building cool projects, building cool stuff on your own is going to greatly improve your own skill set. So make sure you build stuff outside of work if you've got a job. That's also going to allow you to explore tech that your company's not using. So if you do ever get let go, or something bad happens, or you just have to quit, it's not going to be that hard for you to find a new job. Anyway, bootcamp, I would only recommend that if you need somebody over your shoulder saying, hey, do this, now do this, now do this, now do this. But like I said, if you need that, this might not be the best career for you. Self-taught, definitely recommend that. There's too many cheaper sources, like my HTML CSS course, shameless plug here, or Free Code Camp or Team Treehouse or the Odin project. Those are all great resources to learn. Again, like I said, I'd recommend hitting up different sources. Like, go do my HTML CSS course, go do Free Code Camp's responsive web design course, go do the Odin project. That'll give you a bunch of projects. I think I assume you get like 5 projects from the Odin project, but you get 5 from that, 10 from Free Code Camp. You do 5 in my course. So that's 20 projects. So that'd be super solid base to get a job. I feel like if you did all that, you'd be job ready. You'd probably get a job before you finish all 3, but yeah, like when I was doing Team Treehouse, I did their front-end developer tech degree, didn't quite finish it. I got to like the 8 out of 10 course, and then I switched to their full stack JavaScript tech degree, did like 6 out of 10 of that one, and then got a job. So yeah, self-taught all the way. Now, this guy's saying, I quit my job. I've been learning for a few months. Last week, I decided to quit my job and study full-time. For the next few months, I have about 4 months to get my job as a web developer. Was it unrealistic? I don't think in the current economic climate, and like what I see coming in the future, I don't think it's a good idea to quit your job to study full-time for this. I would not recommend that right now. I would recommend using your job as negative emotional leverage. Like, I'm assuming you don't like your job, and that's why you want to become a developer. So use your job as negative emotional leverage whenever you get home and you're tired, or you wake up early and you're like, I'm gonna sleep more. just think, hey, every minute I'm not studying outside of work is another minute I'm gonna have to spend at this job. So use that as leverage. And then that also kind of keeps you safe too. Like the job market's about to get rough. I don't know how bad it's going to get for good developers, because like if you're a good developer, I don't think it's going to be that hard to stay employed or like find a new job if you need to. For new developers that aren't that good yet, it might be a little bit of a challenge. Interest rates are rising, so money's going to get more expensive to borrow. So startups aren't going to be as plentiful as they were before. In general, I don't think it's a great idea to quit your job before you have something else lined up. Because most people that I've seen do this, and then like myself included, I know if I did that, I probably wouldn't spend like 10 hours a day studying. I'd probably spend like 3 or 4 hours a day studying and then just mess around the rest of the day. So it's better to have income, spend the little free time you do have studying versus just have no income coming in and then spend, I don't know, maybe like half the day studying. But if you're sure you'll study like 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day, more power to you. Might be worth a shot. Again, I wouldn't advise it, but that's just me. All right, so I think that's about it for this one. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them down in the comment below. If you want to come hop in the Discord, link to that and the Reddit is in the description. Again, my HTML and CSS course is out now, so if you want to check that out, look for that in the description as well. If you want to get my resume template, the one I was using before I had any tech experience, when I just had my projects on my resume, link to that is in the description as well, so you can get that for free. And I think that's about it for this one, guys. So I will catch you guys later. Peace.
Round 1.